Ladies and gentlemen, sports fans alike, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago. One of the couple, two, three best podcasts around. So sit back, grab yourself a cold one and a Polish sausage, park your keister in the French room, and listen to Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago.
In Chicago, you know that all sports rock. The Bears, Hawks, Bulls, Cubs, and Sox. Pick your favorite, you can choose. As long as the Packers lose. For everything you need to know, it's Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago. Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago. This is your host, Sean. Want to welcome you to the NFL Draft Post-Spectacular. This is the episode where we talk about what the Bears drafted, our thoughts, and things moving forward. But first, as always, I'd like to thank our sponsor, the Rockford Ice Hogs. Although the season is over and they lost in the first round of the playoffs, we'd like to congratulate our Rockford Ice Hogs on a wonderful season. If you're not familiar with the Rockford Ice Hogs, they're the AHL minor league affiliate of the Chicago Blackhawks. What does that mean for you? That means you get to see the stars of tomorrow today at a low, low price. But season is over. Get ready for a new season starting probably in October. Hasn't been announced yet. But in the meantime, get yourself an Ice Hog shirt or a hat and be prepared at icehogs.com. Tell them Swerski Sports sent you. I know everybody and his brother has a thought and an opinion about what the Bears did in the draft. And if you are a regular listener to the show, you know my feelings about Leonard Floyd. If you're not a regular listener to the show, the whole purpose of this show from the inception was to break down players in the NFL draft and watch game film and talk about it and have a forum to do it. And it just sort of evolved into talking about all of the sports. Today's episode, we are not going to talk about the Blackhawks. We're not going to talk about the Bulls. We're not going to talk about the Cubs or the White Sox. This is going to be a short episode, but it's going to be solely dedicated to the Chicago Bears because one of my favorite times of the year, the NFL draft, just happened, and we're going to talk about it. But like I said, is basically right after the Super Bowl until right before the draft, every week I break down one position. I pick about 10, 15 guys from each position and talk about them. And watch game film and discuss it and let you guys have your thoughts and opinions. So now we have the draft. And last year, I mock a new draft every week for about 6 or 7 weeks. And last year, I mocked 5 of the 6 Bears draft picks. And I was pretty happy with myself. This year, I sort of got one. And by sort of, I mean I had a guy that I mocked to the Bears, Kevin Peterson, cornerback. I had mocked him to the Bears in the 7th round, and they signed him as an undrafted free agent. I'm taking that as a win. I got one. And I had a feeling Leonard Floyd would be there, but I couldn't pull the trigger. So let's dive right in first, and let's see where it goes. So the Bears had the number 11 overall pick in the first round. They ended up trading a 4th round pick plus swapping 1st round picks in order to go to the 9th spot. And they drafted Leonard Floyd, outside linebacker from Georgia. Leonard Floyd is listed as 6'6", 244. But really, his playing weight was closer to 220, 225 during his last year at Georgia. He's really, really athletic. He is, extremely athletic for somebody that size. He played defensive end at Georgia, but he also played linebacker, and he dropped into corner coverage on several, like a decent amount. You'd be watching a game, and he would be covering the slot receiver, lined up on the outside. He's very talented that way. He's quick, and he's fast for a defensive end. And basically, he's probably the only pure pass rusher in this draft, arguably. So, but what are the cons about him? Because that just makes him sound really good. He's built like a wide receiver. He's not even as big as Alshon Jeffrey. He's got little twig limbs, and he refused to do the bench press at his pro day or at the combine. So nobody knows how strong he is. And watching him play, I don't think very. I noted in my notes before the draft that I'm not taking him with a top pick. I think he's too big of a question mark. But clearly the Bears organization felt something different. And they traded 2 spots up to go get him. We've discovered later that the Giants were planning on taking him at the number 10 pick. So the Bears, if they wanted him, and he was their guy, he's the guy they identified, they moved up 2 spots to make sure that the Giants couldn't get him. The Giants ended up having to draft somebody else. So why then, if I see a big question mark, are the Bears going and drafting him? Well, first of all, the Bears didn't consult me. I don't know why. I call horse patoot. They didn't consult me. But 2, now that I think about it, and I sit back and I'm watching the draft coverage, and I'm really thinking about what it is that the Bears want from Leonard Floyd. I heard the press conference with General Manager Ryan Pace, and I heard the press conference with Leonard Floyd. And then once the whole draft was over, I got a better idea of what it is they're trying to do. They want to get more athletic. Not necessarily the most production. They want to get somebody that's fast, somebody that's athletic. And a lot of their draft picks meet that criteria. And then they want somebody that they've got a lot of guys that get to the quarterback through power moves. Willie Young, Lamar Houston, Pernell McPhee. They're all power move guys. None of them are fast. None of them just are lightning to get to the quarterback like a Von Miller. Leonard Floyd is that guy. The problem is he going to get just pancaked by a big offensive lineman? That's where we're at. But if you think about it, is what made Vic Fangio so special in San Francisco with that defense? He had Aldon Smith to come and just get so quick to the quarterback. And then if you look at the 2 times that John Fox rebuilt a team and brought him to the Super Bowl from nothing, the first time is they went out and one of their first drafts, they draft Julius Peppers, a really long, athletic guy who got to the quarterback quick. And then they ended up going to the Super Bowl. The second time, he goes to Denver, and one of their first drafts, they draft Von Miller. Von Miller is just like lightning to get to the quarterback. And Von Miller doesn't have a ton of exceptional moves. He just uses a lot of leverage and just gets in there. Leonard Floyd is able to do that. And Leonard Floyd actually has some hand moves. He uses his hands really well to ward off offensive linemen. So when you're watching him, sure, he's not going to plow through an offensive lineman to get to somebody like a Pernell McPhee could, but he's going to use his hands to ward somebody off, and he's just going to go right around him because he runs like a wide receiver. He's a very athletic guy. Now the question is, how are the Bears going to use him? I mean, I know my thoughts, but I can't guess what the Bears are going to do because they've talked about putting him as a 3-down player, and that would mean lining up and being in there in rundowns, and I just can't see that. I have a strong feeling that with the number of edge rushers that you do have, Lamar Houston, Willie Young, Pernell McPhee, Sam Acho, that they're going to put him in situationally, put him in sub packages, and let Leonard Floyd go and just pin his ear back and go after the quarterback. If that's the case, and he just gets in there in certain downs when known passing downs, he might put up some decent numbers. But again, if I'm the offensive coordinator and I see them put Leonard Floyd in there, I'm going to call an audible and I'm just going to do a power run right at him, bowl his ass over, just like they did last year and the year before with Jared Allen. Run right at him. So hopefully the Bears scheme Leonard Floyd very well for the first year until he can put on some weight. And he has put on weight. I mean, last year he played at Georgia at like 220, 225 pounds. He just looks so scrawny out there. But he's bulked up to about like 245. It's pretty solid still. And I'd still like to see him get up to about 265, but we'll see. I mean, he's got several months, and he's going to be in the program, the strength and conditioning program, and we'll see where that gets him. So I'm not, this is one of the few picks that I'm not sold on, but I'm going to trust that this is the guy because Vic Fangio and John Fox were pounding their fists on the table, screaming that this is the kind of guy they wanted and this was the guy to go after. And Ryan Pace pulled the trigger. So you got to have the one thing I can say is whether or not this is a successful pick, that remains to be seen. But I really like the conviction of Ryan Pace. They identified the guy they wanted. They found out somebody else was going to get him, and rather than just sit back and hope, is they went up and they made the move and pulled the trigger and got the guy they wanted. Last year they didn't do that, and they could have had Leonard Williams, who I think would have been a stud in this defense, and he went the pick before the Bears, and the Bears sat idly by, assuming that the Jets weren't going to take Leonard Williams, and because they had such a good defensive line, but they ended up taking him anyway. So it's they went up and identified the guy they wanted, and they got him. And you gotta be appreciative of a team that's done their homework and identified the guy they want, and they did what they needed to do to get him. And they had 9 picks in this draft before the draft started to go out. They had ammunition to move up if they needed to, and they said so much, and they actually did it. But the beauty of it is, in the second round, they decided that the guy they identified, they felt like they could get him later, so they traded back and ended up not only replacing the 4th rounder that they lost, but getting another 4th rounder next year. And we'll get to that in a second. But they ended up, the Green Bay Packers made a trade and leapfrogged the Bears, took Jason Sprigs. Now this is, nobody has said so, but I really, really think that the Bears identified Jason Sprigs as a guy that they liked and that they were going to try to pick up and put him at left tackle. I really feel that was the guy that they wanted. They traded back for him. Green Bay traded up and beat them out because then they traded again and gained another 4th round pick. And they moved back even further because they just felt that the guy that they wanted was not there, and they weren't just going to take somebody to take somebody. So they ended up trading back in the second round twice, gained 2 4th rounders this year and 1 next year. Drafted Cody White, offensive lineman out of Kansas State, 6'4", 301 pounds. Now this is what I wrote about him. I scouted him prior to the draft, and here's what I wrote. Pros: great footwork, great speed for a man his size, pretty strong. Cons: for a strong guy, because you could see the playing strength, but for a strong guy, he does have a tendency to get pushed around too much for my liking, and he gets stood upright too much, and that's where you see him get pushed back. So he's got to maintain that leverage because he's a big guy at 6'4". The notes: I've read an AFC scout that said Cody Whitehair could play all 5 offensive lineman positions, and he did play left tackle and left guard at Kansas State. But the AFC scout said he could play all 5 positions, and my comment was, sure, he could play all 5 positions, but I don't think that the right side of the line is for him. And even though he played left tackle his senior year, I don't see him playing left tackle in the NFL because his arms are too short. He's got little stubby T-Rex arms. I think the ultimate position is going to be for him is either left guard or center. He's mobile enough where he can pull. He can really work in space, but I think he's going to excel when he's confined in that space between the tackle and the center. And I think that's where he's going to be best fit. But like I said, as I feel he could play center as well, but he's going to have to be an interior lineman. He's going to have to play between the tackles. He's not going to be out there on an island. I just don't see that. But Cody Whitehair was ranked as the top guard in the draft. It was a very weak guard draft, but he was ranked the highest. And this was an interesting pick for my opinion. And I want to be clear, I think a lot of people on Twitter that were arguing with me about this, I wasn't knocking the pick of Cody Whitehair. I think he's a very good player, and I think he's going to be even better. I think he's going to be a very good pro. I just thought it was odd because you do have Matt Slauson, who is on the downside of his career, but is still a solid pro. And then you just sign Manny Ramirez and Ted Larson, all to be interior linemen. And you still have Kyle Long, that you are pretty stacked at this position. May not have the most talent there, but you have a lot of bodies there that maybe you should have gone with another position. But then I contradicted myself as well because somebody called me out on it and said that I'm always screaming best player available. And if this is the best player they had on their board, then you go for it, my man. But the interesting thing is, as soon as the draft was over, a few hours after, is they cut Matt Slauson. And again, I was really shocked at this move. Not that I think that Matt Slauson was a lock to get this position, but I felt that bringing him into camp is going to build the best competition. Because if you have one spot and you have Cody Whitehair competing, Matt Slauson competing, Ted Larson competing, all for that one spot, you're going to have good competition because you're going to cut one of them, but then you're going to have somebody that played really hard to get that spot. So I was a little shocked at Matt Slauson, and I understand that where he's at in his contract, and he's getting paid really good money in his contract, but in his contract, he's getting good money, and he is on the wrong side of his career as far as the NFL goes. So I think the Bears just felt that it was a movement for youth, a movement for athleticism, and Matt Slauson, although he's a consummate professional and a great team player, he's lacking those two things that they're trying to do, is build youth and build athleticism, and he doesn't have those two things. So am I shocked that it happened? Yeah, a little bit, but does it make sense? Well, logistically, yes, but we'll see how it works out. I still think you would have been a better team had you kept Slauson and let them compete. But again, you have to look at it as the Bears are not out to screw anybody. And Matt Slauson can find a place in this league where he can compete to start still. And the Bears, if they cut him now, he's going to be on the market. He's going to have the best opportunity to find a landing spot well before training camp, so he can have the best opportunity to start. If they wait till training camp and they cut him down, he's going to be one of the last cuts if he's the one that's cut, and he's going to have a really hard time finding a job. And I felt the Bears did right by him by letting him loose early so he can get his bearings together, find a good spot for him, and go into training camp in another squad, without any sort of last minuteness of it. And I think you have to say kudos to the Bears for that. That was very professional of them. All right, moving on to the third round is the Bears drafted Jonathan Bullard, defensive lineman out of Florida, 6'3", 285 pounds. I hadn't scouted him prior. I mean, I knew who he was, and I'd seen some tape of him, and I've seen several games, but I actually hadn't sat down to watch a game film of him. And the difference being is, if you watch a game, you're sort of watching everything that's going on. You want to see the play. You've probably followed the ball a lot. But when you're watching game film, I don't care where the ball goes per se. I'm watching that player that I'm watching, and it's all I'm watching. I watch what he does as soon as the ball is snapped all the way until the whistle blows. Every play. If he's a left tackle and they do a bubble screen on the right side, I'm not even paying attention. I'm watching what he's doing. So with Jonathan Bullard, I hadn't watched any actual game film yet. But I went after the Bears drafted, and I looked at him, and he is strong. He's explosive. He's really versatile. He can play all across the defensive line. He's quick enough off the ball to play 3 technique if needed, even though the Bears don't play a base 4-3 anymore. And that would be like more of a Lovey system. Cons on him is he could stand to be a bit stronger. He doesn't get blown up on plays, but he can get stood up and blocked out on run plays. And he's not the most stout player against the run. But I keep hearing experts, quote unquote experts, giving differing opinions about Bullard and where he'll play for the Bears. Everyone loves the pick, though. Everybody seems to love this pick, and they're just debating on where his position is going to be. I look at him as a 5 technique, and not a traditional 5 technique where you're just going to be stout and you're going to not be glamorous and you're going to clog up the run. I look at him as like a more modern hybrid type 5 technique, and I think the Bears are looking to build more pass rush. The Bears are looking to get to the quarterback. Last year they signed Pernell McPhee to a big contract. Now they've got a complimentary guy that'll be on the other side in Leonard Floyd, who's going to be lightning fast to the ball. And then those front 3, you got to put interior pressure. You can't just have all of the pressure be coming from the outside. You've got to create interior pressure. And that's what they did by signing Akeem Hicks. And so now I think what you're going to have is your front 3 be Akeem Hicks, Eddie Goldman, and Jonathan Bullard. They're not going to be the most stout against the run. You're going to have that really good linebacker play. Luckily, you signed 2 very good middle linebackers, but you're going to be able to get a lot more pass rush out of them. And I think that's if you have a speed rusher on one side, a power rusher on the other, and then 3 interior pass rushers on the inside, you should be able to collapse that pocket from all sides and create havoc for the quarterback. That's the plan, I think. And I also think that Jonathan Bullard, when they move to a 4-3, when they change it out, and because they don't always run a 3-4, they switch to a 4-front sometimes. And I think in a 4-front, you could put him as either a defensive tackle or a defensive end. I think he's going to be a big defensive end, but I feel like he could play it. He's very versatile. I really like this Jonathan Bullard pick. I think he's going to be a beast for the Bears. Then round 4, where we have several picks. The first one is Nick Witkowski, linebacker out of Virginia Tech, 6'2", 243. He's another one I hadn't watched any film of, and I don't think I watched any West Virginia games last year. Maybe bits and pieces, but not a full game. He was not on my radar, whereas Jonathan Bullard was all over my radar. I just didn't get around to watching film on him. But Nick Witkowski, pros, he's got very good speed. He's a very hard-nosed player, high football IQ, high motor guy, tackling machine. The cons on him are he's way too willing to take on a blocker. He comes in there full blast trying to take on the blocker. He doesn't have enough strength to shed blocks against big offensive linemen. And in his coverage skills, when he drops back in coverage, he's hit or miss. Now, this was a little bit of an interesting pick for me. This tells me that we're probably going to see some more of the linebackers that the Bears had as inside linebackers are not going to make this roster from last year to this year. They're trying to get more athletic and faster, and that's what he is. And he's got very good football IQ, which is a reason why some certain inside linebackers got traded away last year. I really do like his play. I like him a lot. I think he was a bit of a reach in the 4th round, though. I feel like you could have gotten him probably in the 5th, but if he's a guy you identified, then you go with him. He transitioned from a safety where at some point he was a safety at West Virginia, where I don't think he had enough speed to be a safety. But he transitioned over to inside linebacker. He has the speed, toughness, and tackling ability to be a solid backup in Fangio's system. But I think what he's going to end up being is he's going to have the temperament and toughness and tackling ability to be a really good, hell of a special teamer. And if for nothing else, he's going to be a good one, I think. And in the meantime, he's going to keep doing special teams until you have either one of your inside linebackers get injured or have to miss any time. The next 4th round pick, the Bears pick safety from Miami, Deon Bush, 6 foot, 199 pounds. Pros. This guy ran a 4.5 speed at his pro day. 4.5 is good. He's a thumper. He's not afraid to come up versus the run. Cons. He lacks a ton of athleticism. I mean, he's fast, but he's not as athletic, which is a little bit of a surprising pick. Sometimes he looks lost out there. He had some really horrible games last year for Miami. I didn't write down one. I believe it was the Florida State game that he was really bad in. I'd have to go back and look. But he had some really bad games in him. He's not a ball. He doesn't really have the ball hawk skills to be a free safety. And I don't know if he's disciplined enough to be a strong safety. And he lacks the cover skills to be a cornerback. I think he's a jack of all trades, but a master of none. Which, to be fair, is what a lot of people said about Adrian Amos coming out of Penn State. So here's my opinions on Deon Bush. I think he has speed to burn and tons of raw talent, but he doesn't have a strong skill set to play any one position at defensive back. Watching his tape, though, when I first started watching his tape, I really thought he could play cornerback. Then I saw him in man coverage, and I went, all right, I think he could be a free safety. Then I saw him misread several plays and be late over the top. I was like, okay, well, then maybe not a free safety, but what about a strong safety? Ultimately, I think he plays strong safety in this league, and he has the tools to be a good one. He might need a year to develop, though, so we'll see. Now, here's another interesting. Well, is a day or so after the draft is the Bears cut Antrell Roll. Now, if you listen to this show, you know I was calling for them to cut Antrell Roll for a long time. They paid him a lot of money. He was no salary cap implication to cut him. And when he did play, he was terrible. Now, he was on the radio this morning talking about how he thought he played well when he played and all these excuses, and he doesn't think he's too old. He's too old. He's too fat. He can't play anymore. Sorry. You're not going to be a Chicago Bear. You got to go. Now, watching him, what do I want to say here? Let's cut to this in a little bit. Let's put him on pause. So we talked about his pros and cons and what I think about Deon Bush, but I really do think he's going to be a strong safety in this league. The third and final 4th rounder is Deandre Hall, cornerback out of Northern Iowa. 6'2", 199 pounds. Pros, he's a great tackler, really good form, uses the press well, uses his length really well, and he's got decent speed, especially for a guy his height. The cons is he has small school competition and he lacks a ton of athleticism, not the best footwork either. But the notes is I could only find limited tape on him. In fact, I could only find one game film of him. It was a game against Carson Wentz from North Dakota State. But he was great on tackles, really physical versus the wide receivers, and not like bad physical like Eli Apple, where they're going to get hammered. He just was really good, kind of like Richard Sherman or some of the other Seattle cornerbacks, where they're just very physical with you at the line of scrimmage. And he did all of this with a cast on his arm. I think he could step in and be the slot corner for the Bears day one. I really think he has the talent. He was not on my radar, but after I saw the game film of him, I was very impressed. I heard Greg Gabriel call him a young Charles Tillman. I don't know if I go that far because Charles Tillman was a really, really good career NFL player. Deandre Hall I think is a very talented guy, and I think this was a great pickup in the 4th round. And I wish him the best, and I'm going to be watching him closely, but I think he's going to be a key player for the Chicago Bears this year, and I think he's going to get a lot of playing time. 5th round pick, the Bears had one. They got Jordan Howard, running back out of Indiana, 6 foot, 230 pounds. Pros, he is a powerful runner. He's a nice single cut runner. He can drag tacklers. Doesn't have a ton of miles on him. But his con on him, the big con is he lacks home run speed. He's not going to take it to the house. My notes are I really like I really wanted the Bears to get C.J. Prosise. I felt C.J. Prosise could fit in and be a very good back in this three-headed monster system with Jeremy Langford and Kadeem Carey. But the more I think about it, the more I like the Jordan Howard pick better than C.J. Prosise. Even though I think C.J. Prosise is going to be a nice running back in this league. Jordan Howard will be a great complement to Jeremy Langford. If you watch the Michigan tape, and I know I watched this game because I'm a huge Michigan fan, is he nearly single-handedly beat Michigan by himself. He's like a poor man's Marshawn Lynch, and don't get too caught up in that comparison because Marshawn Lynch is borderline Hall of Famer. But he's a poor man's version. It's a similar style where he can do some moves, but he's gonna bowl you over as well. He doesn't really go down with a single tackler, and he will put Kadeem Carey, Jaquiz Rogers, and Sonoris Perry all on notice because several of them are going to get cut. And this is going to be a real change of pace back to Jeremy Langford because this guy is going to be not just the goal line back, but he's going to be that complimentary back where you send him in pound, and then send Jeremy Langford in for the big carry. And the 6th round, the Bears drafted Deandre Houston Carson, free safety out of Kansas State, 6'1", 201. He is hard-nosed. He has experience as a cornerback and a safety. He is not afraid to come up and make a hit. He lacks elite speed, though. He's still really raw. And even though he played at Kansas State, he played a lot of lesser competition than you would at maybe a Big Ten or an SEC school. He played a lot of free safety and cornerback in college, but I don't think he has the speed to be a free safety in the NFL. I think he's going to be a strong safety in the NFL, which is fine because I think that's where his skill set is best suited. He has the size to cover tight ends and the mentality to thump the run. I like what the Bears are doing to strengthen their defensive backs. Is they drafted 3 players that are versatile enough to play both safety spots and cornerback. They have Adrian Amos returning a free safety, which you have to assume he's going to be the starting incumbent. I don't think anybody here is going to beat him out, and you didn't bring in anybody else in the free agent. They released Antrell Roll, which we talked about already, which I think was a big point because all he's going to do by coming in is take reps away from other players. You've got a lot of young talent at safety. You want everybody to get as many reps as they can. They have Bryce Callahan, Kyle Fuller, Jacoby Glenn, Sherrick McManus, and Tracy Porter at your cornerbacks. And you add in there DeAndre Hall, who he just drafted out of Northern Iowa. They also have Omar Bolden, DeMontre Hurst, Anthony Jefferson. Anthony Jefferson, if you remember, he was the safety they drafted last year out of UCLA that they really liked him in training camp, and he got hurt. He's going to be back, and I think he's going to get a lot of time I think he's going to get the biggest chance to win the safety job alongside Adrian Amos. But you also have Harold Jones-Corte, who played a lot last year, and Chris Przinski, who you really don't want as a starter, but he can be a good special teamer. So you've got a lot of bodies out there. It's going to be a lot of competition. Not everybody that was drafted is going to make this team. I honestly think only one of the two is going to make the squad between DeAndre Houston Carson and Deion Bush. I don't know which one it's going to be. I think both of them are solid, strong safeties. I think one will make the roster and the other one will make the practice squad. But and one of them could end up being the starter. You don't know. But I think that Anthony Jefferson probably has the inside track. If he asked me in May, the beginning of May, months and months before they go on into training camp. But we'll talk more about that later. And then finally, the 7th round is the Bears drafted Daniel Braverman, wide receiver out of Western Michigan, 5'10", 177 pounds. He is a playmaker, 4.4 speed, a true slot receiver. Cons, he's a tiny little guy with tiny little size body and tiny little arms. He's a tiny little guy. But if you want to know what kind of guy this is, just go ahead and put the game film of Western Michigan versus Ohio State this year. Ohio State with like 74 first-round draft picks and little Daniel Braverman playing against him, and he made everybody look stupid. He made their defensive backs look silly. And that includes Eli Apple. That includes Von Bell. They made all of them look stupid. He's a true slot receiver. He's got a lot of shimmer and shake. He's going to be able to get open in this league and create some magic. The big question will be if he can put on enough mass and size to not get the crap beat out of him. But if he doesn't get hurt, you're going to see some special things. And he's a a guy that I'm shocked that the New England Patriots didn't get, because he's a kind of guy like they would save Tom Brady and they would utilize the crap out of him. Daniel Braverman, I think, has a chance to be something special. And not a Hall of Fame, don't get me wrong, but I think he could be like a poor man's Wes Welker. And I know a lot of people will be, you're just saying that because he's little and white receiver. But he plays that. He gets lost in the defense, slips behind coverage, makes a play, and he's so quick, he could just, make a big play out of nothing. Great hands. I like this pick. So the Bears, I thought, did a lot of things right in this draft, and it shows that they're trying to build a lot more speed and a lot more athleticism and a lot higher football IQ than they've had. This has just been, I think, other than the first round pick, I can back every single one of these picks, and that's not even a knock on the first rounder Leonard Floyd. It's just that he's the one I have a lot of question marks about. The jury's still out on him in my mind. But the other ones, I think they made some really smart picks. And although they talked about drafting a quarterback, they had the choice at some point of every single quarterback in this draft other than Carson Wentz and Jared Goff. They could have drafted anybody else, and then they must have either not liked anybody else or felt that they were drafted earlier than the Bears were comfortable drafting with them, because they could have gotten Paxton Lynch, who I don't really like, but they could have gotten him. They had several chances to get Connor Cook, which I was a little bit surprised on. And the rumors I hear are true, is they were trying to trade up to draft Connor Cook in the fourth round, which I believe he went first or second in the fourth round. They tried to trade up, and they weren't able to get a deal done to get Connor Cook. But I heard rumors that they were trying to get him. And once the draft was over, they ended up signing Brian Hoyer to be the backup quarterback. So they have a legitimate NFL quarterback to be backup behind Jay Cutler. And it's funny because I hear a lot of these sports announcers talk about what the Bears are doing, cutting veterans and having these young players, is they're basically saying that they're not competing this year. But I don't think that's true. I think hungry players, young players, they're going to be coached up. They've got enough veterans on this team, and they bring in a legitimate backup quarterback in case Jay Cutler goes down or Jay Cutler doesn't play well. And I think this is a win now mode. I think they legitimately think they have Super Bowl aspirations, or at least playoff aspirations. And then on top of that is the Bears went out, and after they drafted, for 7 rounds, they signed several undrafted rookies. And that included Adrian Bullard, offensive tackle out of Texas State, Dan Buchholz, offensive lineman out of Duquesne, Ben Braunecker, tight end out of Harvard, and he's somebody I've heard a lot of good things about, and he could potentially make this roster. Taviz Calhoun, defensive back out of Mississippi State, Don Cherry, linebacker out of Villanova, Deontay Gibson, defensive lineman out of Northwestern, John Kling, offensive lineman out of Buffalo, Darren Peterson, wide receiver out of Liberty, Kevin Peterson, cornerback out of Oklahoma State, who's the one guy I thought the Bears would draft, but they ended up signing him as an undrafted rookie, Roy Robertson Harris, defensive end out of UTEP, and Joe Summers, tight end out of Wisconsin Oshkosh. I haven't seen a lot of those guys play, so I can't really talk about it, but I have heard good things out of the tight end from Harvard, Dan Braunecker. So we shall see. If you want, for next week, I can go ahead and watch game film on those guys if I can find some. But in the meantime, I went through the 7 rounds of the Bears, and I think what I like is the Bears have competition at most positions. I mean, defensive line, they've gotten younger, they've gotten more athletic, they've got pass rushers. In the middle of it, they've got, as far as their edge rushers, they added another one, which is going to be competition. There's going to be somebody that you know the name and you like the way they play that's not going to make this roster, whether that be Willie Young, Lamar Houston, Sam Acho, whoever it may be. Somebody's not going to make this roster. Linebackers, you had some of the players from last year, and you had brought in 2 free agent inside linebackers, and then you drafted Nick Witkowski. So somebody's not going to make it there. There's going to be legit competition for inside linebacker. And then look at the defensive backs. Sure, we know that Fuller and Porter are probably going to be your starters, and Adrian Amos is going to be a starting safety, but you have one starting safety spot that's wide open, and then the backup cornerback spots there's going to be so much competition, like we talked about. You've got Bryce Callahan, Sherrick McManus, Jacoby Glenn, and Deandre Hall. All those guys going to for backups. And then as safety, you have Chris Brzezinski, Harold Jones-Quarty, Anthony Jefferson, DeMontre Hurst, Omar Bolden, DeAndre Houston Carson, Deion Bush, Adrian Amos. You've got so much competition. You're going to go in there going, I don't know who's going to win. And whoever doesn't win, there's going to be some tough backups there. Quarterback, you know who your quarterback is, but there's tons of offensive line position battles, especially now that you've already you fired the shot that Slauson is gone. Running back, there's legitimate competition. Somebody that's pretty good football player is not going to make the roster as running back. And then wide receivers, you have Eddie Royal, you've paid good money for. You've got your franchise tag, Alshon Jeffrey. You've got your first round pick from last year, Kevin White. You've got several other wide receivers that filled the role for you last year. And then you're going to have Daniel Braverman competing all for those 5 or 6 wide receiver spots. So they're creating legitimate competition at most every spot. And that's going to create a better starter, and that's going to create better depth. And those are 2 things that the last 2 general managers talked about, Emery and Angelo. Both of them talked a lot about, we're gotta close the talent gap, and we gotta develop better backups. And they never did either one. They may have gotten some good guys at certain positions, but they never as a whole got better talent. And the Bears, I think, are doing that. They're building a nice core of young players on team-friendly contracts. They've still got, after cutting Slauson and Roll, not including the rookie cap, which is probably about $6 million, the Bears have about $20 more million they could spend. They've got room to move. So if they feel like there's something to be had, maybe they still pull a trigger and get a Muhammad Wilkerson. And there's tons of free agents left that the Bears might start going out and signing guys to 1-year prove-it deals like they did last year to fill spots and create more competition. So don't think the Bears are done tweaking this roster yet. You're going to see more big names that not make this roster. You're going to see some guys that you never heard of probably signed to 1-year deals. And you're going to see some mean, badass competition in training camp. So that's all I really have to say. I'm excited. I love the NFL draft. Thank you guys so much for listening. Make sure you subscribe to iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, however you listen. Share it with your friends. Comment. If you guys want to get in touch with the show, if you go to swerskisports.com, all of our contact information is on there. Facebook.com/Swerski Sports. Twitter @Swerski Sports. If you contact us, we will read your comment on the air, talk about it. If you have questions, we will answer them. And thank you guys so much for listening. And until next time, bear down.
Cubs win! What a lucky break! The good Lord wants the Cubs to win!
We thank Ditka and God for all they have provided.
Cubs win! Cubs win! Cubs win!
Oh, I don't want her. You can have her. She's a Packer fan. She can't fit in my
my van, and she looks like number New Yorkers. Smoking crack is not legal on the plains.
Bears 31 to -7.
The Bears.
Oh, when the bears go bearing down,